Suggest a change of wording to extend the programme. So we've got 24 boarding houses in it, and there's many, many more that should be in the pot and getting looked at. So it would be extension, which is, I think, what you're asking
Continuance for. And extension, with an extension. Okay, something like that. Okay, I think Grant.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, does that encapsulate the primary thrust of Lydia's presentation, in that we have a number of houses that maybe don't come under this boarding house categorisation that are maybe the new problem here, even more so than the boarding houses we've been monitoring? Can I ask, Grant, is that are you going to be able to address these houses that are being used as boarding houses but aren't under your orbit thus far? Off the radar.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, so we are seeing an increase in the rate of complaints specific to those dwellings. The definition of boarding house allows us to extend our program to encapsulate those. It's our view that a proactive response is warranted, and we were looking to consider that as part of the next round of monitoring.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Kimpton's talking to Grant about the issues that can go into that, so we can rewrite it when we're finished. We've got some other questions, though. Councillor Fletcher?
I just don't like express support. I mean, this is a committee. Are we requesting? I just think that if this is to give expression to the response that Lydia is wanting today, express support is not. We have the ability to direct. So if we are wanting to direct or request, then we should be specific.
Yep.
Okay, well, we can change that as well. Mr. Kimpton will talk to me about that, and we'll carry on with the questions. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you. Once again, Board Chair Sorsini has brought to the Council an issue of major importance, so thank you for that. And obviously it's a developing issue, so while the Council may have been quite wise not to embark on a bylaw some time ago, a couple of years ago, things could change. But so my questions really are to Grant and Mr. Barnes, and that is, if I understand it correctly, there is a number of pieces of legislation, including the Residential Tenancy Act 1947, which I suspect we're going to hear a lot more about in light of the unitary plan recommendations from here on in. With all these pieces of legislation, you have compiled like a regulatory protocol, and with that protocol, you're inspecting to ensure that the law is being complied with. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Here's a simple question. I think what Lydia has told us just confirms the notion that the idea of boarding houses that I have, and I'm sure other people have, is kind of like from English movies, with the boarding house knock and the landlady at the door in case anything was going on untoward. But I think that's a different kind of a world we're dealing with now. But I've had complaints about a boarding house in Ponsonby, and it relates to the lack of provision of soap. And this has been going on for some years. I can say that it has been frustrating in the past, but recently, and possibly it's something to do with you, the response from council officers have been a lot more positive. Are boarding houses meant to provide soap? Simple question. You don't have to answer it now, but it's absolutely critical in terms of
at a
health.
regional, we
Right.
run the city,
Basic,
you're asking about soap.
fundamental hygiene and health when you've got crowded
Buy
services.
soap.
It can be
You buy
answered
it in the shop.
offline to you then.
Okay,
Thank you.
answer offline.
Councillor-
I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but it's just a demonstration
Oh, yeah,
how this
very-
problem,
yeah,
a
yeah.
little
Very
thing like
slip-
that.
Profit.
Good
a very
question,
slippery
good question.
slope.
Councillor Penrose
Not
next.
even on the first
Good
item, it's
question.
11:15.
Well, we all have, they're all,
This is an important matter,
Councillor
buy
Penrose.
core business.
People can buy soap.
Wash your mouth out, councillor.
Councillor Wood, being that we haven't got this as an item on the agenda, and it was originally, the local board did write to the Reg and Bylaws Committee, and I thought it'd be best to come to this committee, being that yourself and Councillor Casey's been managing this one. You've asked for questions. Can I make a comment, please, Mr Chair?
Yes. I know your question at this stage, but, well, okay.
Well, there's no item on the agenda, so if I can make a comment.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I just want to make a comment in regards to Grant's feedback from the regulatory arm of council, and may I say, Mr Mayor and myself met with the Minister of Local Government on Friday, and he was very clear to us that he wants to see councils across the country show some prudence and the fiscal envelope. And I know we're going into an election campaign, and I see a number that say that continually that we've got to keep rates at 2% and be fiscally prudent. And I've said around this table for me a long, long time now that you know, we've got to have the people on the ground to be able to deliver the outcomes. And I've said from day one that when we went from 158 bylaws down to 20 over the last 5 and a bit years within the statutory time frame, that unless it's workable, doable, enforceable, we shouldn't have it there. Grant's highlighted today that the tools are already there within the building and regulatory area. And if we're to go and down a bylaw process, Mr Chair, again, I would err on the side of caution because, again, it involves more staff. And again, I sit around this table getting told that we have too many staff within the organisation. Yet, over the last 12 months, we've had a good number of staff leave our organisation for a whole raft of reasons. And again, I point out the fact is that I would be more concerned not just about boarding houses, but makeshift garages, carports, vans, camper vans, and I can take you to a whole heap of them in the south, where I have deep concerns about that. But again, it goes back to, we already have the tools there now, but we need the troops on the ground to be able to deliver the outcomes. So, you know, whether you're a mayoral candidate leading up to it, or whether you're a councillor or a board member, you know, bear in mind that if you want to deliver outcomes in the growing city, you're going to have to front row it. I'll leave it there, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Webster?
Yes, Mr Chairman, I just wanted to, I mean, Councillor Watson sort of brought up the issue that I was going to raise, but having listened to the debate around the table, I'm very uncomfortable that this is being dealt with in this way. I applaud the chair of the board for bringing it to us, but it isn't about boarding houses per se, it is about the continuing trend to use, as Councillor Penrose said, other areas. I've heard some hair-raising stories from staff about the number of people being charged for $300 to $400 a room with no adequate cooking facilities, cooking on barbecues outside, that sort of thing. I think this actually warrants a report to this council, to this committee. I don't do that lightly because I know Mr Kimpton is very concerned when we do that, and I don't think I've ever asked for an extra report to be brought. I think Grant's trying to do a really good job. I think the word boarding houses is a misnomer in this situation, and I mean, maybe it should go to, no, I think it's got to go to a committee of the whole, and I would request that further work's done on this and a report's brought back to this committee.
Okay, well, that's now there. It'll come back as a report to the appropriate committee. Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Councillor Webster, because that's where I was going to. I think we need to get our heads around this. I generally support the A and the B there, but I think we need to delve into it deeper. And look, this is just another aspect of the extremely complex Auckland housing crisis.
Absolutely.
You know, whichever way you look, there's another aspect. It's not, there's no silver bullets getting ourselves out of jail on this. It's going to be a decades-long project that we'll be embarking on. But I am actually aware, and I guess Councillor Webster was alluding to this, while we're focusing on boarding houses here, I'm aware of another category of short-stay hostels, for example, which have got more lenient legislation around them. And the legislation goes back to 1947, which is outdated. It's the Housing Improvement Regulations, which I think the IHP referred to as something that we could rely on. So it's got language which we no longer use. It talks about water closets, lavatories, and it is so outdated. So the mechanisms that we've got at our disposal need to be reconsidered by the Parliament because we're hanging hopelessly at the moment. So I tend to agree with Councillor Webster. We could, have our two bob here today, but it actually doesn't make a lot of difference unless we delve into it as we should.
Okay, thank you. I'm just doing Mr. Kimpton here. So, Councillor Clow.
Thank you, Lydia, for bringing this to our attention again. I have a question really for Grant, because effectively what we're talking about around here at the moment is boarding houses with overcrowding because of homelessness or people unable to afford their own homes or renting their own properties if they can find it. But there is another issue, and we've had something flare up in Green Bay and Godley Road with several properties with boarding houses where these are boarding houses where there's quite a lot of, basically all the boarders are troubled individuals that have come from various departments, including corrections. And we've had an example, like Lydia mentioned, the rapist, but we've had a murderer that was referred into a boarding house, and that person is an incredibly aggressive criminal who intimidated everyone in all the houses, and that led to antisocial behaviour across the road in the shopping centre, begging, intimidation of people outside liquor shops, and then that leads into liquor in public places because there's a park that was used, and again there's no enforcement. How are we dealing with that situation? Because standards for people where it's overcrowding, and that, of course, we needed to monitor that, but then there's another ramp up when you're getting these boarding houses that do have, as I say, that really is a lot of troubled individuals that are going to be troubled in a lot of situations. So and indeed most of the benefits have been paid by government agencies to pay for the rent. How are we coordinating with government agencies, and where does the line get drawn? That's my first question.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, you're quite right, Councillor Clow. For this to be effective requires a multi-agency approach, and being very deliberate, this council engaged prior to taking any physical steps with the compliance program with the Ministry of Social Development, Ministry of Business Innovation, New Zealand Police, Salvation Army, Mont Celia Housing Trust, Corrections New Zealand, Civil Defence and Emergency Management, and our very own community safety team. We consulted and collaborated extensively prior to embarking on the operational plan, and in fact sought guidance from Councillor Casey and her committee on a contingency. One of the concerns that officers had is by embarking on this compliance program, we would have unintended consequences on those residents and further exacerbating their difficult housing circumstances, such that contingency plans were put in place should a difficult decision such as issuing a closing order be required. Fortunately, in both rounds of compliance, that was not required. Those facilities were able to open. And then, if I may, in specific reference to your observations about criminals and aggressive folk and individuals with mental health issues, yes, that's very real. And this was very deliberately the reason why we were working with Corrections, the Probation Service and the New Zealand Police. As those agencies are the primary ones for dealing with those matters, we've made sure that we've done our work in conjunction with them, in collaboration with them.
So what is our responsibility on the behalf of neighbours? Because it's often neighbours in the situation where you have troubled people with mental illness or whatever, causing a lot of angst for the neighbours and indeed petrifying people. Have we got a role in that, or is that all corrections?
Point of order, Mr Chairman. I think we're straying into, I mean, this was a local board 5-minute presentation. That's why I actually called for a report.